The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them, until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today, in the Gospel, we hear the journey of the wise men from the east, sometimes referred to as the Magi. We speak about three kings, but why do we say so? The Gospel text has nothing about kings, leave alone the number three. So who are they? They are important persons who devoted themselves to the study of science and especially astronomy, referred to as sages or wise men. Now, how many were they? We are not told how many know their names. We speak of three, probably because of the three gifts that are mentioned: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gifts themselves come to us from Isaiah in the first reading, chapter 60, verse 10. In that place, it also makes a reference to kings. And so, in later tradition, we began to speak of them as three kings. What do the gifts mean? The wise men gave these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What can we give to God, who's the source of all gifts? And why did they bring him gifts? These gifts were not in recognition or for the need of the baby Jesus, but for the fact of who the baby Jesus is. Gold symbolizes the kingship of Christ. Incense, his divine nature. And myrrh, his redemptive suffering and death. Now the word itself, epiphany, it's a Greek word, which means really God appearing to us, revealing himself, or as we would say, a manifestation of God. Just as it is important for God to reveal himself to us, it is also important that we recognize this God who reveals himself. And the gospel text that we heard is a good indication of how we can respond to this Jesus who is among us. There are three sets of characters in the gospel today. They symbolize three responses to Jesus' birth: hatred, indifference or ignorance, and worship. First is Herod and those who plan to destroy Jesus, hatred. Secondly, the priests and the scribes who ignored Jesus with their indifference. And the third, of course, are the wise men. They worshiped Jesus and offered themselves to him. So let us take a look at these three characters. First is Herod. He and all those who plan to destroy Jesus on hearing about the king. He doesn't hesitate to destroy those who come in his way, who threaten his position, who will take away his power. And in his discussion with the wise men, Herod pretends that he will do homage and worship, but actually is plotting the destruction of Jesus. What does this have to say to us? Authority and power are for service. They're not meant to dominate or to oppress. Because when it happens, such persons try to manipulate and to control. It can happen in direct ways. It can happen in very smooth and subtle ways. Politicians then and even now, today, will not hesitate to use their power, to use religion to cling to their position like modern day Herods. It can happen also in our homes, our place of work, in church organizations. So often, authority and arrogance, unfortunately, go together. And when that happens, like Herod, we seek to dominate, subjugate, even manipulate so that we can get people to fall in line. And when we feel insecure in the presence of others, like Herod, we mock them, we try to silence them, we just sideline them. We can be cruel and hard-hearted with those whom we dislike. Some do it harshly, some do it smoothly. But all the same, it is destructive of others. So we ask ourselves, is there something of Herod within us? Secondly, the scribes and the Pharisees, they are familiar with the scriptures, the promised Messiah, yet they are indifferent. They were able to tell Herod the exact time and place of the birth of this Messiah. And although they knew the scriptures, they did not allow it to become a life-giving word. They practiced all the religious rituals, but in no way were they in a real relationship with God. They had the religious knowledge, but they were not open to a religious experience. They had religiosity, but they did not have much religion. They talked spiritual things, but authentic spirituality is absent. This is false piety. Knowledge alone does not save. Every cigarette packet has the warning, smoking is injurious to health. We know that it will cause cancer, diseases of the lung. However, people still smoke. Having knowledge is not enough. We must understand things correctly and act on it. What an irony. Those who are familiar with the scriptures ignore what the scriptures point out to them. Sometimes there are biblical fundamentalists, often belonging to these small little groups or sects, who memorize Bible verses but condemn others to hell. We may know the Bible verses, but we can be so empty of the Spirit of Jesus. Like the scribes, such knowledge does not make them better. Therefore, it is important that the more we experience Jesus, the more we will be merciful and compassionate, not harsh and condemning. Now, even though Bethlehem was so close to Jerusalem, the scribes refused to see the child Jesus. What about us? We have been baptized, gone to Sunday school, but how deep is this faith of ours? Some are content with being merely cultural Christians and remain in that comfort zone. The Christmas tree, the Christmas party are more real than the Christ child. Is there something of the scribe, Pharisee within me? And finally, the group that worshipped Jesus and offered him gifts, the wise men, the Magi. They left the comfort of their home as honest seekers. They had what St. Augustine called a divine restlessness. They have wisdom, but they're also humble to admit there is so much more to learn and so much more to know. Some people think they know everything, and are not open to any new knowledge or new experience. No one can teach them anything. They don't want to learn anything new. We have such people among us. They hijack every conversation. They are always right. Their perspective is the only one. Have you met some of these? Even worse, are we one of them? Now, it's important to understand the significance of the solemnity of the Epiphany. Matthew is writing to the Jewish Christians. Their temptation for them was to think that this expression of a faith was not just another Jewish sect like the others. And they thought that the message of Jesus was meant for them particularly. But it's not only for them, but for the whole world. And therefore, the wise men come from the different parts are meant to represent that. So let me place before you 4 important points as to what these wise men can teach us. First, the wise men were seekers who follow the star. They were guided by the star. You could call it as the first GPS, which indicated the way that they should go. Science, best understood, leads us towards God. Science is not contradictory to faith. It is complementary to the faith. Second, the wise men follow the scriptures. It was through nature, first of all, the star, that they found their way to Jerusalem. But that is not a complete revelation. It does not tell them where precisely they can find the King of the Jews. By nature, the stars are not enough. They need the scriptures. And therefore, the revelation of nature is strengthened by the revelation of the scriptures. The third, the wise men were humble. I wonder what conversation they had on the way to Bethlehem. They were saying, I wonder what he will look like. What will be the kind of dwellings he has? They allowed them to be surprised. The King of the Jews to be born in a manger instead of a major palace. You know, sometimes we look for God in the grandeur of big things, even in the antiseptic places. But God is found in the muck of human existence, in the manger, the feeding trough for animals. In experiencing Jesus, they were able to allow themselves to be surprised to find this God in such a humble place. A God who, because of love, made himself so vulnerable. And that love can be accepted, but it can also be rejected. Fourthly, whom do the wise men represent? They represent people of goodwill who respond to God's revealing light. They represent all the people who are searching for truth. They did not have to renounce their own cultures, but they had to have that openness to find that truth. And in experiencing Jesus, they experience a change in their life. So then, what does the solemnity of Epiphany call us to? It calls us to a conversion of mind and heart and of spirit. The visit of the wise men to Jesus in Bethlehem concludes with their return to their own country with that interesting phrase, by another way. In biblical language, to change one's path suggests a change of life, a conversion. The external journey is influenced by the internal journey. Meeting Jesus changes us for the better. It cannot be life as before, life as usual. The question is, how do we allow ourselves to be changed? In our relationship with Jesus, do we spend time in prayer? Not only pouring out our hearts, but listening in the silence. In dealing with others, how do we care for those who are weak, broken, poor, and vulnerable? In our attitudes, are we people who are encouraged and affirm, grateful for all that is done for us? Or are we destructive, always fault-finding, criticizing, gossiping? In our behavior, are we able to let go of our resentments? Or do we constantly hit back with revenge? The more we have of Jesus, the more we will become like Jesus. Now, I mentioned 3 characters But there is one last character who is at the heart of the story, the babe of Bethlehem. The wise men come to Bethlehem, which is a Hebrew word meaning Beth means house, Lechem means bread, the house of bread. We have come to this prayer service, which is Bethlehem, Jesus, the bread of life. And like the wise men, we learn to worship this Jesus. Our hearts and our minds have been enlightened by this word of God. And to receive and experience the Jesus, the bread of life, gives us strength for our journey. The journey does not end. It continues. It's not only an external journey, but what's happening within. Because finding and experience God is not a once and for all event. It's an ongoing event. Because He's Emmanuel. He's God with us. He comes to us in the joys of life, but He also comes to wipe our tears. He journeys with us. We continue to experience this Jesus in our journey through personal prayer, reading of the scriptures, and in our relationship with one another. So, let us be the star that leads other people to Jesus through the witness of our lives. Let us be the gifts that we offer to Jesus. We may not have gold, frankincense, and myrrh, but we have our talents, our capabilities, and even our brokenness, so that God will transform them. And like the wise men who returned by another way, we are invited also to do the same. A new way of living and journeying because of Jesus, the bread of our life. And so let us in this Eucharist take a liturgy of the word, embrace the Lord. Let this be our personal epiphany of not only whom we have experienced, but whom we witness through our life. So may it be in your life and mine. For a few moments in silence, let us ponder on this word and allow it not only to rest in our hearts, but to speak to our lives.